All right, welcome. Welcome to session number 163 of Kevin Reads A Course in Miracles. All right, our little study group. Okay. We are in chapter 20, which is the vision of holiness. And today we'll focus on section number 7, the consistency of means and end. All right. So there has to be consistency. And the end is what we seek, the goal, right? What is it that you want? That's the end, right? And the means are the tools, the ways that you're going to get to that goal. That's the means. There has to be consistency in that. All right? And he says, so we'll begin. We have said much about discrepancies of means and end, and how these must be brought in line before your holy relationship can bring you joy. But we have also said the means to meet the Holy Spirit's goal will come from the same source, as does his purpose. Being so simple and direct, this course has nothing in it that is not consistent. Right? The seeming inconsistencies, or parts you find more difficult than others, are merely indications of areas where means and end are still discrepant. And this produces great discomfort. Right? This need not be. This course requires almost nothing of you. It is impossible to imagine one that asks so little or could offer more. So he's telling us, look, the Holy Spirit doesn't ask much from you. All right? So he says, but we've got to keep on making sure that the means to getting to the goal are consistent. And he says, as far as the Holy Spirit's goal, which is the union, the remembering of who you are, right? The remembrance of oneness, right? And the peace of mind, and in this earth plane, being able to see through the eyes of peace, through the eyes of Jesus, so to speak, right? To be able to see correctly, right? Having the ego's vision corrected, right? Those are all the part of the goal of the Holy Spirit, and it says, and it comes from the same place, all right? As the means come from the same place, all right? And sometimes I think the discrepancies come when we take control, all right? And it's hard not to. And nobody's saying, you're doing something wrong and all this. Just notice when you're becoming uncomfortable, and trying to figure out how to get peaceful. Okay? It says that the means to meet the Holy Spirit's goal will come from the same source as does his purpose. All right? So everything comes from that. Everything comes from the mind of God. So it will come into that part of our mind that remembers that. It'll come from that source, how to get there, all right? Okay, so let's just try to let him clarify things. The period of discomfort, paragraph 2, the period of discomfort that follows the sudden change in a relationship from sin to holiness may now be almost over. To the extent you still experience it, you are refusing to leave the means to him who changed the purpose. You recognize you want the goal. Are you not also willing to accept the means? If you are not, let us admit that you are inconsistent. purpose is attached by means. And if you want a purpose, you must be willing to want the means as well. How can one be sincere and say, I want this above all else, yet I do not want to learn the means to get it? All right? I mean, to me, what it's suggesting is, when he says that, you've got to admit you are inconsistent. All right? When I start all of a sudden, I'm trying to figure out your innocence. I'm trying to figure out what it looks like. I'm trying to figure out, why you do the things you do, And he's going to be telling us over and over again here that that's not the way. That's the way to confuse yourself, okay? You don't have to figure out anything, all right? You just have to wish to see the other innocent. You have to wish to see the correction of the ego's vision. I just want my vision corrected. I'll leave it at that. Don't try to correct it. Don't try to guess what corrected vision looks like. That's when the means become discrepant. All right? He says that it's almost as if we're inspired by something to seek the goal of peace. Now let that same source inspire the means to get there. All right? In other words, we just enter the stream, like a leaf that just dropped from the tree into the stream. Right? The leaf doesn't try to figure out which way to get there, which way to get to the end. It just lets the stream take it. Okay? Excuse me. My throat is dry. Okay? And he says, so you've decided, oh yes, I want to see this other person. I really do. I'm willing to see his innocence. All right. Oh, I'm willing to see her innocence. All right. I'm willing to let the innocence to rise up in my awareness. All right. He says, to the extent you still experience discomfort in this, all right, he says, you're refusing to leave the means to him. All right. You recognize you want the goal. All right. Are you also willing to accept the means? All right. If you're not, if you want to stay in control, he says, then let's just admit that you are inconsistent. All right? If you want the purpose, you must be willing to want the means as well. Right? How can one be sincere and say, I want this above all else, yet I do not want to learn the means to get it? Okay? So it's just the willingness to see the other, the desire to see the other, the desire to see the whole world through corrected vision. Right? You don't have to figure out how to do that. You've already made the strong request. Help me to see correctly. And let the corrections rise up. Okay? Paragraph 3. To obtain the goal, the Holy Spirit indeed asks little. He asks no more to give the means as well. The means are second to the goal, and when you hesitate, it is because the purpose frightens you, not the means. Remember this, for otherwise you will make the error of believing the means are difficult. Yet how can they be difficult if they are merely given you? They guarantee the goal, and they are perfectly in line with it. Before we look at them a little closer, remember that if you think they are impossible, your wanting of the purpose has been shaken. For if a goal is possible to reach, the means to do so must be possible as well. Okay? And that's a big statement here in paragraph 3, sentence 4. When you hesitate, it's because the purpose is frightening you, not the means. So the goal is to see through loving eyes. The goal is to see peace, right? And once you have peace of mind, the awareness of love rises up, okay? And he says, that's what you're afraid of. That's what you're afraid of. The purpose is frightening you, not the means, okay? Because if I'm looking, if I'm willing to see the innocence in the other, all right, the idea of forgiveness, I stop projecting my guilt, all right, and I'm willing to be corrected, all right, that forgiveness is going to lead me to the awareness of God, all right, so that goal of corrected vision, which will lead me to the awareness of God, that's what's frightening me. Not the means. Oh, am I going to get there? That's too hard. Right? He says, that's not what's bothering you. He says, it's actually the goal. All right? But if you think the means are impossible, your wanting of the purpose has been shaken. All right? Your wanting of the purpose is to, it's that remembrance of oneness, right? Your unity with God, your unity with everything, all right? That's the goal. He says now that goal has been shaken because deep down inside you're a little scared of it. I always use that image now of the little kids running up to the waves, and then when the big wave comes in and crashes, they run away. They run away back up onto the sand, the dry sand. Okay, so that's what we do. Just don't, and he'll always tell you to be very nice with yourself. Okay, I read a wonderful excerpt of a poem by John O'Donoghue this morning, and the end of it was that he says, "Be excessively gentle with yourself." Okay, this world is exhausting. And we might sincerely desire peace of mind, right? But we get mixed up. And he says, be excessively gentle with yourself. And that's what Jesus would say to you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. And then renew your dedication to the purpose. My purpose is to achieve that peace of mind from which the awareness of God will grow. Okay? So he says to obtain the goal, the Holy Spirit asks little. And what we're talking about is moving from sin, the idea of separation, to the idea of the oneness, the holiness. All right? And he says, it doesn't ask much. You don't have to put in an effort, really. But it does, at times, frighten us. All right? So, for if a goal is possible to reach, the means to do so must be possible as well. All right? Jesus clears up, the cloudiness and just makes that logical statement. All right? If a goal is possible to reach, and it is, right, and it definitely is, peace of mind is definitely achievable. Okay? It's reachable. I don't know if I want to use the word achieve because it sounds like I need to do something. You know, I have to practice or something or work. Right? I just need to want it. Right? And I need to be willing to let the means be shown to me on how to achieve it. All right. So, let's go to paragraph 4. It is impossible to see your brother as sinless and yet look upon him as a body. Is this not perfectly consistent with the goal of holiness? Right? For holiness is merely the result of letting the effects of sin be lifted. So what was always true is recognized. To see a sinless body is impossible, for holiness is positive, and the body is merely neutral. It is not sinful, but neither is it sinless. As nothing, which it is, the body cannot be meaningfully invested with attributes of Christ or of the ego. Either must be in error, for both would place the attributes where they cannot be, and both must be undone for purposes of truth. Right. So he says it is impossible to see your brother as sinless and yet look upon him as a body. Right? And remember that the idea of sin is the idea of separation. So let's tweak it a little, right? It's impossible to see your brother as part of the oneness and still concentrate on his body or her body, the form, right? The language, everything about the form, right? So he says if you're stuck on the form, right, it's hard to see, it's impossible to see the sinlessness. We have to look past the costume. Right? He says the body is nothing really. You can't give it the attributes of sin or Christ. Right? He says the holiness is merely the result of letting the effects of sin be lifted. Right? So that's what we're asking. Help me to see correctly. Help me to see with the effects of the belief in separation lifted. Right? For holiness is merely the result of letting the effects of sin be lifted. So what was always true is recognized. To see a sinless body is impossible. For holiness is positive and the body is merely neutral. Right? All right, so if we're stuck on form, all right, it's impossible to rise above it. Well, it's not impossible to rise above it. Let's put it that way. It's difficult. We need to rise above the form and ask, help me to see correctly. Right? And I have to be willing to let that correction rise up in my mind. Okay? So, and he says, then just let what always was rise up to your awareness. Right? And what always was your connection to God. He says, just let that rise up in your awareness. All right? And once again, in this section, Jesus is letting us know that he knows it's a process. It's a process. Okay? So, paragraph 5. The body is the means by which the ego tries to make the unholy relationship seem real. The unholy instant is the time of bodies, but their purpose here is sin. It cannot be attained but in illusion. And so the illusion of a brother as a body is quite in keeping with the purpose of unholiness. Because of this consistency, the means remain unquestioned, while the end is cherished. Seeing adapts to wish, for sight is always secondary to desire. And if you see the body, you have chosen judgment and not vision. For vision, like relationships, has no order. You either see or not. All right? So, he says, the body's the means by which the ego thought system tries to prove that it's separated from God. All right? So the unholy instant is the time of bodies. So that unholy instant when we decided to believe I could separate from God, that created the time of bodies, because it's the embodiment of the ego thought system. All right, so the unholy instant is the time of bodies, but the purpose of this, the purpose of bodies, right, is sin. Okay, now, don't take that in the puritanical sense. Remember, the idea of sin is just the belief in separation. Okay, the belief in separation. Right, so that's the purpose. Right, the purpose here is to prove separation. And then he says, but separation can't be attained except in illusions. Right? He says you can't separate from God except in illusions. Right? In this dream, in this hallucination that we're walking through. All right? It cannot be attained but in illusion. And so the illusion of a brother as a body is quite in keeping with the purpose of unholiness. Right? So the body becomes like the means, all right, of proving the end, which is separation. All right? This is very consistent. All right? Because of this consistency, the means remained unquestioned. Right? And so we never really questioned, am I really separated from God? All right? We never questioned it until, somewhere along the line, the one Son of God did question it and say, wait, what is this? All right? So, I lost my place. So because of the consistency, the means remain unquestioned, while the end is cherished, while the separation from God is cherished. That's the end. That's the goal, is to prove I separated from God. So while we still cherish that, the body is the consistent proof. He says, but you can only see these things in illusion. All right, the sun came out. All righty then. seeing adapts to wish. Sentence 6 in paragraph 5. So what you see is adapting to what you really want. All right? So he says you cherish the idea of separation. So your mind being so powerful, it shows you, here, this is all separation. All right? And so seeing adapts to wish, for sight is always secondary to desire. And if you see the body, you have chosen judgment and not vision. For vision, like relationships, has no order. You either see or not. All right? So if you see the body, you have chosen the whole ego thought system, judgment, right? And not vision. Okay? Once we believe we're separated from God, we start judging everything, right? Including God. So, paragraph 6. Who sees a brother's body has laid a judgment on him, and sees him not. He does not really see him as sinful. He does not see him at all. In the darkness of sin, he is invisible. He can but be imagined in the darkness. And it is here that the illusions you hold about him are not held up to his reality. Here are illusions and reality kept separated. Here are illusions never brought to truth and always hidden from it. And here, in darkness, is your brother's reality imagined as a body in unholy relationships with other bodies, serving the cause of sin an instant before he dies. All right? So he says, whoever sees a brother's body has laid a judgment on him and doesn't really see who he is. That's all he's talking about. We walk around, we see other bodies, and we don't really see them. We don't really see their reality. Okay? So it does not see him as sinful. It just doesn't see him at all. Right? So we don't see the masses, the people that we run into. We don't see them as separated from God. Right? We don't see them at all. All right? We don't see the truth about them, is what he's saying. All right? He says, in the darkness of sin, all right, this is a very poetic sentence, in the darkness of sin, he is invisible. All right? In that cloud, that veil of forgetfulness that falls when we believe we're separated from our source, when we believe we're separated from God. He says, in that milieu, you can't see. It's dark. All right? So he's virtually invisible. You can't see the truth about the other. All right? He can be but imagined. All right? We can only imagine things about the other. All right? And that's what we do. And Jesus is just saying these things, remember, just to point them out. Just stop and realize at times, what am I doing? Right? What am I doing? I'm imagining. Right? You look at a person, right? I mean, especially, I mean, it happens all over the world, believe me, everywhere, even small town USA. Well, you take that for example, because I live here in New York City. So you're always, if the street's not crowded, you want to see who's coming toward you. You're automatically imagining things about the other. All right? And it would go on. All right? It would go on in small town USA. If they saw me there, right, they would automatically figure out, oh, he doesn't live here. You know, it's a small, if it's a small community, where, as they say, everybody knows everybody. Well, here comes Kevin. Nobody knows him. What's he doing here? You start imagining things about me. I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's what we do with everybody. We're imagining things about them, right? He can be but imagined in the darkness. And it is here that the illusions you hold about him are not held up to his reality. So in other words, we imagine these things about the other, right? And we're not really bringing that to the light. Right? We're not holding up his reality. We're not holding up the imaginings to what he really is. Right? We're not trying to compare. We're not doing that. We're just sticking to our imagination. So the illusions you hold about him are not held up to his reality. Here are illusions and reality kept separated. Okay. Here are illusions never brought to truth and always hidden from it. And here in darkness is your brother's reality imagined as a body. So here in this world of form, everybody else is imagined as a body, not the abstract spirit that is connected to God, in the mind of God. I see them as flesh and blood, form. Right? And here in darkness is your brother's reality, imagined as a body, in unholy relationships with other bodies, serving the cause of sin an instant before he dies. So one body after another, serving the cause of separation, right? Proving separation real. And, you know, that's what we do an instant before we die. All right? Remember, just pointing out what we do. So that we can bring our imaginings to the light, hold them up to reality. And that's another way of saying, help me to see correctly. I'm willing to go toward reality and say, help me to see the reality. Right. Paragraph 7. There is indeed a difference between the vain imagining and vision. The difference lies not in them, but in their purpose. Both are means, both are but means, each one appropriate to the end for which it is employed. Neither can serve the purpose of the other, for each one is a choice of purpose, employed on its behalf. Either is meaningless without the end for which it was intended, nor is it valued as a separate thing apart from the intention. The means given them, the means seem real because the goal is valued, and judgment has no value unless the goal is sin. So the constant judgments that we apply to the others, they have no value really, unless our goal is to keep proving that we're separated from God. All right? So he says that there is indeed a difference between this vain imagining and vision. Right? So he says there is a big difference between what we imagine out here in the world about everybody and everything and about ourselves. Right? So there's a difference between this vain imagining and vision. Vision, when I ask for corrected vision, So there's a difference between what you imagined and what vision will show you. And the difference lies not in them, but in their purpose. So the bottom line is, the difference lies in the purpose of my life. All right? The purpose. Do I want vision? Do I want to see my ego thoughts corrected? Or do I want to continue with this great sense of individuality? All right? And, you know, everybody else is different and separate, and I have to maintain this individuality. So the difference lies in the purpose. It says both are means, and each one is appropriate to the end for which it is employed. All right, so vision. All right, I would like to have my ego thoughts corrected. All right, so that I can get to the goal of oneness, all right, of peace of mind. All right. So neither can serve the purpose of the other, for each one is the choice of purpose. Right? So the means and the end, it's the choice of what it is you want. Right? Either is meaningless without the end for which it was intended, nor is it valued as a separate thing apart from the intention. The means seem real because the goal is valued. So the means seem real because the goal is valued. Right? And he says a judgment has no value, right, unless the goal is sin. Right? A judgment, my projection of guilt on other people. That sense of lack I have about myself is a judgment. He says you wouldn't value it unless the goal was to prove the separation. All right. Paragraph 8. The body cannot be looked upon except through judgment. To see the body is the sign that you lack vision and have denied the means the Holy Spirit offered you to serve His purpose. How can a holy relationship achieve its purpose through the means of sin? Judgment you taught yourself. Vision is learned from him who would undo your teaching. His vision cannot see the body because it cannot look on sin. And thus it leads you to reality. Your holy brother, sight of whom is your release, is no illusion. Attempt to see him not in darkness, for your imaginings about him will seem real there. You closed your eyes to shut him out. Such was your purpose. And while this purpose seems to have meaning, the means for its attainment will be evaluated as worth the seeing, and so you will not see. All right. This is if we didn't believe in the separation, all right, if we didn't judge ourselves to be guilty of destroying heaven, all right, you wouldn't be able to see any bodies. Because that's the result of that judgment. I did something wrong. Now I have to leave. I have to flee the mind. All right, make up this whole thing. All right. So the body can't be looked upon except through judgment. You wouldn't see the body unless you believed in separation. To see the body is a sign that you lack vision and have denied the means the Holy Spirit offered you to serve His purpose. How can a holy relationship achieve its purpose through the means of sin? All right? So in other words, if we keep deciding, we keep projecting guilt, this is how can the holy relationship achieve its purpose, which is the remembrance of oneness. Okay. So he says, and judgment, he says, it's something you taught yourself. All right. Judgment you taught yourself. Vision is learned from the Holy Spirit, from Jesus, because they would undo this teaching of judgment. All right. So judgment you taught yourself. Vision is learned. And we learn it from Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Help me to see correctly. All right. And the Holy Spirit, or Jesus, his vision cannot see the body, all right, because it cannot look on sin. So the Holy Spirit looks past the body to the innocence. All right. His vision cannot see the body because it cannot look on sin. And thus it leads you to reality. All right. Because the Holy Spirit knows what the other is all about. All right. He could see the reality, and he will help us get to that same vision. He'll help us get to the reality. Okay. And thus it leads you to reality. Your holy brother, the sight of whom is your release, is no illusion. So once again, when I'm willing to see the innocence of the other, I'm willing to see the truth about the other, the truth about me arises in my awareness. Right? The sight of your holy brother is your release. And he says, this is no illusion. This is, this is real. So in other words, attempt to see him not in darkness. Don't be looking at him through the eyes of the ego. Right? For your imagining about him will seem real in that darkness. It will seem real. So, this choice for separation, he says, you closed your eyes to shut him out, and such was your purpose. And while this purpose seems to have meaning, the means for its attainment will be evaluated as worth the seeing. And so you will not see. So as long as we want to keep everybody and we want to keep love at arm's length, right? He says, that's what will happen. He says the means for its attainment, the idea of separation, will be evaluated as worth the seeing. Right? So he says, what do you want? Right? What is it that you truly want? Paragraph 9. Your question should not be, how can I see my brother without the body? He says, only ask, do I wish to see him sinless? And as you ask, forget not, his sinlessness is your escape from fear. Salvation is the Holy Spirit's goal. The means is vision. For what the seeing look upon is sinless. No one who loves can judge. And what he sees is free of condemnation. And what he sees he did not make, for it was given him to see, as was the vision that made his seeing possible. Right? So this is, do you wish to see your brother sinless? Right? How can I see anybody without a body? He says, that's not the question. He says, the question should be, do I wish to see them sinless? Do I wish to see this person sinless? Right? Do I wish to see this person connected to God? Do I want to see that connection of God and this other person? Right? And he says, so don't forget, that his sinlessness is your escape from fear. So when I'm willing to see the sinlessness of the other, my escape from fear, my own innocence arises in my awareness. My own connection to God rises in my awareness. And fear is vanquished, it's banished. So he says, salvation is the Holy Spirit's goal. My release from this ego thought system is the Holy Spirit's goal. All right. And the means will be given you. The means, vision is the means. So that's what I keep asking for. Help me to see correctly. Just let it rise up. Don't figure out what it's supposed to look like. Just I'm willing to see the innocence. I'm willing to see the truth. All right, just let it rise up. That's the vision. For what the seeing look upon is sinless. All right, so those who have changed their perspective, what they look upon is sinless. There is no separation. Right? No one who loves can judge. And what he sees is free of condemnation. Right? And what he sees, he did not make. I see the innocence. I didn't make that. For it was given him to see, right? It was given me to see the innocence. And it was the vision that made his seeing possible. All right? So I ask, help me to see correctly. And that becomes and when I want that and only that, the Holy Spirit provides the way to do that. You don't have to do any work. You just have to be most sincere about your desire to see correctly. Okay? And allow the Holy Spirit to drive the bus, so to speak. Just another way of saying things like, come with holy empty hands unto your God. Right? You don't have to know what the solution is. Allow it to rise up in your mind. You don't know how to see the other person without judging. So just be willing. I'm willing to see them without judgments. Help me to do that. And in that seeing is your salvation too. You see yourself correctly. All righty then. I think we will end it for today. All right. I guess there's nothing else. Okay. I look forward to the next session. All right. Thank you.